Hello, Lower Marion, and welcome to the Environmental Update. I'm your host, Brian Hoppy. We're still dealing with the effects of the pandemic, and we hope all those watching remain safe and healthy. We're still conducting the show remotely, but we have a great one for you. In this episode, we'll hear from Lower Marion's Parks and Recreation Department on how they manage their lands, and from the Penn State Extension, and learn the latest and greatest on spotted lanternfly management and control. First off, it's my pleasure to introduce Donna Heller from Lower Marion Parks and Recreation Department. Welcome, Donna, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Brian. Much appreciated.
So why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. Donna Heller, Director of Parks and Recreation for Lower Marion Township. I've been with the township a little over 22 years. I started as the recreation supervisor under Lindsay Taylor. And prior to that, I was with the city of Burlington in New Jersey. In both roles, as I was the director in the city of Burlington, and in that role, I was out dragging fields. I was out, pulling trash. I was pretty much doing everything because it was a two-person show. Come to Lower Marion, and we have more, but we don't have as much as a lot of other places as far as staff and that sort of things. And you learn to do the right things with the people that you have. In my role as director, I'm responsible for the overseeing of the operations in both parks and our recreation services.
Excellent. And I know coming from a smaller township to a little bit of a larger one, but then you look over, City Avenue and you see the crews that the Philadelphia has, and you have to sometimes sit there in awe on what they can do with their lands. But we have a great team that you work with there, and we see them out all the time. So thank you for that and for your leadership. Can you explain a little bit about how Lower Marion plans for and manages our township parks and sporting fields?
Sure, absolutely. Our parks are open to the public. So, we get everything from, animals, dogs, mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, utilizing different facilities for different reasons. A lot of our space, we have over 700 acres of lands in the township that we're in charge of and manage. And it goes from densely wooded to waterways to athletic playing fields and courts. As far as the use of those on a ongoing or regular basis, say by any of the youth sports leagues or any of the adult leagues, there are permits required to reserve space. And our township code is based on a unit of 5. Anybody 5 or more in a group are supposed to obtain a permit to utilize a given space for dedicated use. But they are just open to the general public. But if a permitted group comes in, then you have to vacate the area that they are permitted for. And then as far as the management side of things, we go into different details depending on what the area is used for and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can tell you with, raising 2 children in the township, having access to those parks has just been a godsend. The playing fields, the parks, it's just great to get your children out there and connect them with nature, or have space available for them to play soccer, baseball, softball, whatever sport they fancy at that moment in time. And there are different groups that help you, right? There's friends of different things. Can you maybe explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. Our friends groups are invaluable. They are, just regular citizens. Some come with fantastic backgrounds, whether it be, in the field, an arborist, an environmentalist, people that are either educators or just in the field of natural resources. And some are just, regular people. They could be businessmen and women that are interested in benefiting the parks. And these groups, Friends of Kinwood Heritage Trail, Friends of West Mill Creek Park, I could go on and on. There's about 12 groups right now in different parks within the township. And they just assist us with things that our 18-man crew can't can't get to in that 700 acres. They assist with planting days. They assist with just general oversight and observations that they see in the park on a day-to-day basis, because most of them are the park users. So it's a fantastic opportunity to get involved and do minor improvements in their park to make it better for themselves and their neighbors and other park users.
Yeah, I do think that the township and our residents are at their best when they come together and help out each other, or help out our township staff, and just maintain the beauty that we have and that we enjoy within the township. Moving to another topic. There's been a lot in the news over the past few years on the use of pesticides and herbicides and their effects on beneficial insects like bumblebees and butterflies, and other wildlife, on humans and on water quality. How does the Parks and Recreation Department minimize the use of pesticides and herbicides on our parks and sporting fields?
We have to use mechanical measures initially. We use chemicals as a very last resort. So mechanical measures could be either hand pulling, covering, smothering, mechanical measures with the equipment that we have access to. We cut our turf, our grass, at a minimum or a maximum of 3 inches. So we never put our blades below 3 inches. Once you start getting into those fine, when you have open space, just bare ground, that gives invasives an opportunity. So we do everything we can to increase the density of our turf, our planting beds, things of that nature, to kind of dissuade the invasive species to take root. So those are the opportunities we try to do before we would go into any kind of pesticide management.
Okay. And, so since you and the department have a lot of expertise in this area, is there anything you can recommend that our residents do to limit their use of pesticides and herbicides and do their part to improve our environment?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they should definitely try the mechanical measures first. You work through the process. You try mechanical. If it returns, you try another type of mechanical effort, whether it's a machinery or covering, smothering. And as a last resort, we do have certified pesticide applicators. They go through the Department of Agriculture and take classes and courses, and finally have to pass a test to become a certified pesticide applicator. And what that does is, it educates that user of that material on ratios, mixtures, storage of those materials, so that everything's done properly and not adversely affecting things that you're not trying to affect. Many times when a pesticide is used in more of a lay setting, whether it be a homeowner or that sort of thing, that it's more of a broadcast thing when it really shouldn't be. It should be a very targeted use, as opposed to, I want my lawn to be green and dandelion free. So those types of things. There's also a lot of organic materials. They also require different types of applications. But that certification, I really would like to emphasize as far as a useful tool to make sure that our homeowners, our landscapers, have that information and that background educational experience, and are on a registry to apply those materials.
I guess you mentioned organic materials. I guess the same could be said for fertilizers, and maybe utilizing compost and other things, as opposed to improve amend the soil, as opposed to just dumping a bunch of chemicals on your lawn.
Absolutely. We actually use soil testing. We use Penn State Extension and take a soil sample of our facilities and send it out, see what the soil actually needs, as opposed to, the broad-based commercial fertilizer. Sometimes a lawn may just need a little tweak in one direction or another as far as its nutrients, as opposed to all of the things that might come in one bag.
Yeah, I mean, I used to, in not a former life, but just former part of my career, used to do a lot of work with the military, and they were always testing equipment to minimize their maintenance cost. And the one apparatus they had that I thought was really neat was a insecticide attachment to the back of whatever they were driving. Could have been a truck, could have been a little John Deere thing. But it sensed when it came across a weed, an invasive, and it sprayed from that one nozzle, not the whole thing the whole way. It was really neat. And I was hoping that those pieces of equipment would make it on the commercial side. I know they make it into farms, but hopefully it'll be in a Home Depot or a Lowe's sometime soon. Last question: do you have any volunteer opportunities for our residents to take advantage of?
Yeah, as you had mentioned, the friends groups in our township are widespread, and there's a number of different interests. As I mentioned, West Mill Creek, that's one of our off-leash dog parks. And then we have the Friends of the Kinwood Heritage Trail, which is the trail that's a 2-mile long trail, connects us to Philadelphia over the Manayunk Bridge. Both parks offer different things, and then expand that by another 8 to 10 groups that are in wooded settings or municipal or park settings that would really enhance the park. So I would suggest looking up the Parks Friends groups. They all have different websites, but there is a link on our township webpage.
Well, thank you, Donna, and thank you for your leadership within the township and all that you do to keep our township parks and playing fields beautiful and able to be used by our residents.
Thank you.
It's time for us to take a short break. When we come back, we'll meet with Emelie Swackhamer from the Penn State Extension. Speaking of the Penn State Extension, thanks for that drop, Donna, to discuss one of my favorite topics, spotted lanternflies. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Environmental Update. I'm your host, Brian Hoppy. We're very fortunate to have Emelie Swackhamer, a researcher with the Penn State Extension, join us on the Environmental Update. Welcome, Emelie.
Hello, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes and introducing yourself to our audience.
Sure. I'm an extension educator with Penn State here in Montgomery County. So our office is in Collegeville. It's really closer to Skippack. And we provide research-based information for people to help them solve real-world problems. And we do a lot of different things at our office. So I work in horticulture. I work primarily with landscape professionals, but sometimes with our farmers. We have an agent that handles the agronomy side of things. We have nutrition and food safety educators and a big program in that area. And also we have the 4-H program, and that's the youth component. So some of you might be familiar with that. We're part of Penn State University, and we're the outreach of the College of Ag Sciences into the communities. We connect the people of the counties with the research that's happening at the university. So we have lots of help to do this as well. We have a volunteer program called the Master Gardeners that help me with horticulture questions. We have Master Watershed Steward volunteers. We have 4-H leaders that are volunteers. So we have a lot of people that help us, and that allows us to run a much bigger program.
So with your Master Gardener program, I've seen some information on that. What does it take to become a Master Gardener?
Yeah, so there's a training period that people go through, and then they're required to volunteer a certain number of hours to maintain their active status. So they can find more information about that through the Penn State website or by calling the extension office and talking to Dawn, our Master Gardener coordinator.
Excellent. So I know one of the other things that the Penn State Extension does is a lot of research on one of the newer pests in our area, Maybe before we get into the spotted lanternfly, are there other invasive species that Penn State Extension works with and provides information on?
Oh, absolutely. Really, there are invasive species. It's a worldwide problem. So we have a lot of invasive species, insects, weeds, some diseases, but they are happening. It's happening across the world. So there are invasive species in, other countries, like other continents like Asia. And I think it's really important to remember that, because I've worked with people who, were really concerned about invasive species, and they often come from other continents. But you have to realize that there are North American native things that are in other areas of the world causing problems there. So yeah, there are invasive species. We are sort of overrun by Japanese stilt grass, and that is taking over forested areas. It's a grass that will grow in more dense shade. And it's becoming a real problem because it's taking over lawn areas, and it leads to all sorts of problems with trade as well. Other areas of the country don't want invasive species being shipped out to them. And it's really, really hard to avoid that every time. People are being as careful as they can be through education and scouting, checking products before they get shipped. But it's just an ongoing battle. Another invasive species that's really evident right now is the emerald ash borer that's been killing our ash trees. And you see ash trees dead all over southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm concerned that some of them are becoming hazardous and can be dangerous. So everybody should recognize that, the dead trees that we're seeing, not every dead tree is killed by spotted lanternfly. And really, spotted lanternfly has not killed very many trees at all. Emerald ash borer has killed millions of trees. So invasives is a really big issue.
Yeah, whenever a new species comes into focus, it feels like everybody pays attention to that one and forgets about everything else that's still here.
Yeah.
And the Japanese stilt grass and the emerald ash borer certainly are two that the Environmental Advisory Council for Lower Merion has paid attention to and continues to pay attention to. With our Shade Tree Commission, with you notice that Donna Heller was on previously, with our Parks and Recreation Department. And there's a lot of things that we did as a township to proactively care for some of our champion ash trees, but then also for those that were affected. There was a lot of tree removal, and our residents saw that and would ask us questions about it, and we told them it's because we have this insect that's coming in and causing them to die, which then leads us to spotted lanternfly. That's a new insect, newish within the last 5 years, and especially the last couple of years, that has come into our township. I noticed when we were talking before this episode that 2 years ago, I saw 2 adults on my property. Matter of fact, I didn't even know what it was at first, and I said, "Oh, wait a minute, that's a spotted lanternfly." Now, this past summer, they were everywhere. So can you share with us what Penn State Extension is doing in terms of the latest and greatest on research on the spotted lanternfly?
Sure, there's a lot of research going on. So I think some of the results of the research that really apply to residents are some points that we're trying to get out there. So one of the major points is to not overreact. We know the spotted lanternfly is here. I mean, it is very important that we don't spread it to other parts of the country, but you really don't need to treat every tree on your property. You really don't need to use lots and lots of chemical pesticides. There are smarter ways to react to it. Unfortunately, it's not simple. It's not a one size fits all kind of answer. So there's lots of things you can do, and they're at all different levels. So you can use mechanical controls. And early on, we were talking about using sticky traps bands around trees. And this is a mechanical method, no pesticides involved. The lanternflies fall out of the trees, they crawl back to the trees and crawl back up the trunk. And that's a behavior that we can take advantage of. But the problem with these sticky bands is that you can catch wildlife. And it's really, nobody wants that to happen. So the researchers have tested a variety of different traps. And the new trap is called a circle trap. And it's kind of almost like a funnel that you build out of mesh and you put it on your tree. And then it funnels the lanternflies up into a collection container where they die. You can buy them commercially, but you can also make them yourself. So it's a great project if you want to have kids help you. We have a fact sheet that gives you a step-by-step, like pictorial demonstration of how to build these circle traps. So I'm hoping we see a lot more of them this year. And that people stop using sticky bands, and especially if they're not putting some sort of wildlife guard around there. You really need to protect the wildlife.
Yeah,
so mechanical methods.
Yeah, the circle trap. I did construct one based on your flyer last year, and it worked really, really well. I probably waited a little bit too late. I didn't get it installed at the nymph stage. I went and did it after they were adults, but at the top of that funnel, I had a bag full of adults that I had to empty pretty regularly. And it was interesting, if you're looking in your backyard, you could see which trees they amass in. They don't hit every single tree in your backyard. So you can target certain trees and put these traps on those trees and save a little expense as opposed to treating every tree in your backyard.
Yeah, that's really good to hear that you've tried it. They're not very hard to make, and you can configure it to, adapt it to your tree and, the size of your tree. But you make a really great point that you don't need to treat every tree. So spotted lanternfly, we have not seen it killing landscape trees. So watch your trees and monitor it. And if you see lots of spotted lanternfly, those are the trees to put the circle traps on. And those are the trees to consider maybe using one of our pesticide recommendations. Of course, we want you to choose the least toxic option and, protect the trees that have the high populations. And from year to year, in general, the lanternflies go back to those favorite trees. So it can help you figure out, from year to year, by paying attention in your landscape, where to put your effort and the expense of it. And really, people shouldn't use home remedies. So, we've seen a lot of things on social media about using dish soaps and a variety of other things. And none of those products have been tested for safety on the plants. And you don't have any instructions really for how to use them safely. And it's technically illegal to use them as insecticides. So use registered insecticides, something with an EPA label, and choose the least toxic. And if you call the Penn State Extension office in any county, you can get advice on that. But we also have a hotline at the university, and the number is 1-888-4-BAD-FLY. Kind of catchy. And you can talk to a real person during regular business hours that will help you work your way through what your management options are for spotted lanternfly.
And I'm really glad you mentioned some of the household products that I think some of our residents think this is a more organic way of doing things. And I did have a few neighbors using vinegar. And I said, well, no, don't use vinegar. I said, if you use vinegar, that will kill your plants. If you add a little salt to it, it'll really kill them. So stick away from that. And I'm really encouraged by the research that you're doing, that the Penn State Extension is doing, and all that you offer our residents. And I'm sure not many really take advantage of it. So the website is there for their use, and the various flyers that they have. And again, that circle trap, it's very easy to make. It takes maybe $20 of materials from Home Depot, or you may even have things in your garage or basement that you haven't used in a long time. Cobble them together. It's really simple.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. And thank you, Emelie. And really, again, thanks for joining us and sharing all the great things that the Penn State Extension is doing to advance our understanding of the spotted lanternfly and what our residents can do to control them.
We're here to help. Thank you for having me.
Well, that does it for the spring edition of the Environmental Update. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's program. If you have any suggested topics for future episodes or have a question on an environmental issue, please email us at the address below. Thank you and see you again this summer. Be safe and stay healthy.